Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The ongoing controversy in Paris in reference to the Olympics as it pertains to boxing. Female boxer makes a defiant gesture after being beaten by a biological male in the Paris Olympics. Bulgarian boxer Svetlana Staneva refused to shake the hand of Lin Yu-ting, who has male XY chromosomes, allegedly. Instead, she held her hands up in an X gesture, a symbol for women.
We've been talking a lot about this, and at the center of the controversy, the crux of it, are the differences in how the IBA used to regulate women's sport, women's boxing, and how the IOC is regulating them currently. On what basis?
No, the IBA was stripped of recognition for internal corruption. That's the short version.
Match fixing.
So the IOC is overseeing things in their absence, but the IOC seemed to be stirring up more controversy than the IBA used to, at the expense of the women boxers themselves, that they're not okay with this. What seems to be the IOC redefining the category without their own approval, as this is not the way things used to be.
These athletes were banned.
Emaine Khalif, Lin Yu-ting, these athletes were banned by the IBA until the IOC decided to lift that ban and, in effect, expanded their own vocabulary in order to redefine the category and how they categorize women's sports.
So you can see from Angela Carini's reaction, Luca Hamori, more recently Svetlana Staneva, that they're not all right with this. Along with the spectators in what is this spectator sport, the participants themselves.
They're not all right with this, and what's being offered up as an explanation for what we're seeing is that this is a developmental issue, a sexual development issue, a nuanced situation, really. That Emaine Khalif is, in fact, a woman, but a woman with a condition that creates a nuanced circumstance. Images of the fighter in her younger years before puberty would have hit.
This is being offered up as evidence that Emaine Khalif is qualified to compete in this category.
Emaine Khalif is getting most of the attention at the center of this controversy. Lin Yu-ting isn't as talked about, though all the same. These are the two fighters that are at the center of it. There are no images of Lin Yu-ting when Lin was a child.
Speculation.
If this is a nuanced DSD kind of deal, DSD kind of situation, what are the odds that two boxers in the same Olympics would have the exact same medical condition that only affects 1.7% of the population? That's a very small number.
It's an estimate.
And that in and of itself is a guesstimate because we don't know that that's the situation. The IOC didn't confirm that both boxers that were banned last year have the same condition.
And that's why they're reported to have XY chromosomes.
And the next question, on the premise that that is the situation, and that is what's going on, if that is what's going on, what's more important, their right to privacy or the majority of other female athletes' rights to assurances that they won't end up boxing someone who has a competitive advantage over them that
were banned,
at least up until recently, wasn't even qualified to compete in this category?
That's the implication.
That even if this is a nuanced situation spawned by a medical condition, if that condition gives those two athletes an edge over the girls in this category, shouldn't that disqualify them from competing?
To the IBA, the presence of XY chromosomes was enough to exclude these two fighters from competition, but to the IOC,
and this is all on the premise that these two athletes even have this unique medical condition. We don't know that due to the vagaries from the IOC that are not really providing a detailed explanation as to what's going on here, because outwardly, how it's being interpreted is that you're allowing men to box women.
That's what some people think. We don't know if it's true, we don't know if it's not true.
And so, images of Emaine Khalif have been circulating when the boxer was just a small child in order to prove that the boxer is in fact a woman, as well as images of the boxer's birth certificate. But that in and of itself is raising eyebrows.
Because the birth certificate is said to have been issued out in 2018 when the boxer's career started.
To that, Buck Angel, an open transsexual, stated, "A birth certificate is not proof of sex. My birth certificate was actually changed many years ago to reflect male. I am a biological female with XX chromosomes. I can prove to you who keep telling me that Algeria's Imane Khalif is female because of the birth certificate. That is proof of nothing. What is proof of sex is XX and XY chromosomes. This is me before and after testosterone injections. I did not change my sex. I changed my appearance. By the way, this is a very personal thing I am sharing with the world in order to help us all get back to sanity and fairness in women's sports. Love, Buck."
Yeah, but we don't know if these two athletes are trans.
Then what is the takeaway?
The takeaway is that the birth certificate or the passport, in and of themselves, that's not evidence that these are biological females because those things can be altered, augmented.
So when the IOC offers up these documents as evidence that these two athletes are qualified to compete in this category, it's really no evidence at all.
What would be?
A chromosomal test, like the ones that the IBA claims to have conducted. The tests that revealed these athletes have XY chromosomes. Is the reason the IOC is holding off on doing that because they're afraid of what it would reveal and how the public and the fighters would react to that.
But wouldn't the medical condition everybody's talking about explain that?
It would, but that would also mean that under the IBA's guidelines, these two fighters should have never been allowed to compete against these girls because they were banned on that premise. Thus, the IOC allowing them to compete alienated those girls, those athletes, like Angela Carini and Luca Hamori, more recently Svetlana.
Even if it's a medical condition.
Even if. Because if that medical condition gives them XY chromosomes, they're not qualified to be in this category.
What's the problem?
The IOC's looking for a solution that doesn't ruffle any feathers, that doesn't alienate or exclude anyone. But the girls in the competition right now feel excluded. They feel alienated.
Betrayed by the IOC.
If you would have kept the ban in place, there wouldn't be any controversy to talk about.
No uproar.
And at the worst, it would have been at the expense of two very unique boxers that may have very unique circumstances. But the expense of two people. Now what you've done seems to be at the expense of every XX boxer.
Angelina Carini, Luca Hamori, Svetlana.
It seems like keeping the ban in place would have been the lesser of two evils. Because the ban last year didn't spawn the outrage that lifting the ban spawned.
This year.
Men's junior middleweight news per a tweet from Lance Pugmire via Sebastian Fundura's promoter, Samson Lewkowicz. He said, "Of course it is clear that Crawford is not the same as he was. I don't think that fight with Saul Canelo Alvarez would be successful, and very few would buy the pay-per-view."
He says he's not the same as he was. Is he saying that he's slipping?
Was that slippage we saw yesterday? Old age and father time catching up to Terence Crawford, who when last we saw him before yesterday looked indomitable, invincible.
Is he invincible now?
These are just my thoughts. While father time catching up to a fighter is no isolated incident, it's expected and it's common, and if you stay in the sport long enough, it's bound to happen. I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that that was slippage we saw yesterday. I would sooner say that that was ring rust, because Terence Crawford was out for over a year. So there's ring rust, there's campaigning at a new weight, and adjusting to it, fighting bigger fighters than you're used to, as well as the quality of the fighter that you're fighting. And I said this many times in the build-up, Israel Madrimov is tricky. He's very tricky and better than advertised. I think better even than Errol Spence Jr., though because he's not as known as an Errol Spence, as popular or promoted as an Errol Spence Jr., people are expecting him to just go in there and lay down. Those people, not me.
You guys know I like to repeat myself. How many times in a build-up did I tell you that Terence was going to look human? That at least at the start, and getting used to this guy and trying to find a groove.
Don't be surprised if he looks human. So he looked a little bit more human than people expected him to, but he won the fight. I think he won the fight, so does Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu said, "I scored it 8-4 to Bud. Welcome to 154.
Where I think Terence won the fight and Tim thinks Terence won the fight, there's a minority of individuals saying it should have went the other way. Israel won.
How do you know it's a minority?
Because if you conduct an independent poll on most social media platforms, most of the people voting will tell you that Terrence won the fight. Maybe it was tougher than expected, tougher than they thought it would be, but he won. That's how most people saw it.
So then what's going on with this minority of individuals that want me and you to believe that Israel should have won?
So Canelo fans, Spence fans.
Those are people with an agenda, people with ulterior motives, people who already didn't like Terrence Crawford going into this fight for whatever reason, whether it's because he beat up Errol Spence Jr. or because he wanted to fight Canelo Alvarez.
Those are people with an agenda.
Now, some of them won't admit it. They wish to appear impartial, unbiased, so that in doing so, they can gain an audience for these opinions, which come with ulterior motives.
How do we know you don't have ulterior motives?
Because I'm a fan of both fighters. I'm a fan of Terrence Crawford, but I'm also a fan of Canelo Alvarez. I think they're both great, and I rate them both highly. Terrence Crawford going in there and looking human doesn't make him overrated, doesn't make him a bad fighter. Some people said that Canelo looked human against John Ryder, that he got touched up in that fight.
That Terrence didn't knock Israel Madrimov out?
Well, the man's an unbeaten fighter. He's never been knocked out. When's the last time Canelo knocked somebody out? I don't say that to slight Terrence. I say that to highlight that the criticisms are uneven, the way they often are when ulterior motives are involved. Canelo has looked human before, so if Terrence looked human yesterday...
Hey, you crucifying him for it.
But because they wanted to move up and fight Canelo Alvarez because they were ambitious and they thought that maybe they stood a chance, that makes you mad?
What the hell's wrong with you?
Now, I think based on yesterday's performance that they will reevaluate that, and we'll talk more about that in another video. But to Samson Lewkowicz's contention that Terrence is starting to show signs of slippage, or those individuals who want you to believe that he lost yesterday.
It's bullshit.
Fighters younger than Terrence, under those same circumstances, against that kind of fighter, not only would they look human, but they would probably lose, because Israel Madrimov is no pushover. And I didn't wait until after the fight to start saying that. I've been saying that.
You gonna pretend you didn't hear me say that?
These ain't regular circumstances. A naturally smaller fighter in his mid-30s moving up in weight after a year of inactivity against a guy like this, a well-schooled amateur like this, that's why I think he looked human, because this guy's better than advertised. He's tricky. You don't want to admit that because it challenges what you want to believe.
Terrence is overrated.
Well, stop worrying about where people rate him. You can rate him wherever you like. If you want him to be behind Canelo Alvarez on your pound-for-pound list, then you can put him there. That's where he is on mine.
Both Canelo and Terrence rank in behind Alexander Usyk and behind Naoya Inoue.
That's where I have them, and if you don't like that, fly a kite.
Kick a rock.
Suck a dick.
Fuck off.
I think it's a big deal that Terrence Crawford looked human for the first time in a long time, and on that premise, you're saying that he lost.
What do you expect to believe that?
You don't even believe that. You're just telling me because you want me to believe that. You want me to qualify it. You want me to agree with you. But I don't. Terrence is a polarized fighter. He has been for years to some people. More so now because he wanted to fight Canelo, so now the Canelo fans don't like him.
It's polarized.
So there's a small group that's waiting in the wings, waiting for him to look human so they can have something negative to say.
That's it.
As much as you don't want to hear this, he's fighting a very good fighter yesterday, and I didn't wait until yesterday or after that to start saying that guy's a good fighter and he's tricky. I've been telling you that.
You're just hard of hearing or stupid or something.
I just in keeping with the theme of taking too much time off and looking human as a result, Andy Ruiz, after Andy Ruiz's fight with Jarrell Miller, that was scored a draw, Jarrell was seen fist-bumping His Excellency Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh, who Rick Glacier stated this is when Turki told Jarrell Miller he won that fight and told him he's getting Miller a big fight next, that he earned it after that very solid performance. If I'm being completely honest, 100% honest,
He won.
I think that Jarrell Miller should have got the decision, but that's not what I predicted. That's not. What I predicted was that either Andy Ruiz is going to win a points decision or they're going to score it a draw.
And they scored it a draw.
So in the realm of forecasting the outcome of the fight, I was at least right there. It did go the distance and they did score it a draw, but perhaps they shouldn't have.
What we saw.
In the opening stanza, the first 2 rounds of the fight, that was the Andy Ruiz that I expected to show up because I happen to think Andy Ruiz is a better boxer and a better combination puncher mid-range to inside than Jarrell Miller. But Andy's success, at least for me, was really just limited to those 2 rounds. From round 3 onward, this guy ran out of gas, and he ran out Big time.
Big.
Jarrell Miller was bullying him. He was dog walking him down and applying pressure, putting punches together. Andy, after a while, he wasn't even throwing. He was just moving around trying to create space.
Getting punched.
After the fight, Andy Ruiz Jr. revealed that he broke his hand somewhere around the 5th round. That would explain why he just stopped throwing and stopped fighting and just started surviving. He's very fortunate that that fight was scored a draw because in my eyes, he lost.
That injury, that busted up right hand, that's going to keep him out for a while.
For a guy who's already been out a long while, ahead of this weekend's fight, the guy hadn't fought in something like 2 years. That was the nature of the problem. That if in the last 2 years, Andy Ruiz would have been more busy and more active, I think he would have beat Jarrell Miller, beat him handily, because in the opening stanza, he was doing all right, and he looked how I thought he would look. It's just that didn't last very long.
Jarrell Miller took over, started bullying him, pushing him back, putting punches together, going to his body, going to his head.
He should have won that thing. He should have. And for that, it seems that Turki Al-Sheikh will continue to find good use for him. Jarrell Miller, whether you like him or not, is a serviceable heavyweight with more personality than most fighters today. He's a character, and he can draw attention to himself, sell a fight. So it's actually a good thing for this division that Turki Al-Sheikh wants to stay in the big gravy business.
Gravy.
Any number of potential matchups are out there for him. Maybe he can service as a rebound fight for Jared Anderson in what could be billed as the battle of the big babies.
Gravy.
Maybe he can fight Derek Chisora in the UK. Between Derek Chisora's cult following and Big Gravy's salesmanship,
Gravy.
you can sell it. Miller versus Chisora, Miller versus Anderson, Miller versus Joyce,
Parker,
Zhang. You can sell it. With Jarrell Miller, you can sell it. Because if the other guy ain't got no personality, he does.
Gravy.
Being honest, if Anthony Joshua takes care of business next month with Daniel Dubois, I wouldn't be at all averse to seeing an Anthony Joshua versus Jarrell Miller fight. They've got unfinished business. They don't like each other.
Gravy.
Big baby, big business. The charismatic, flamboyant, albeit morbidly obese, Big Gravy is a great salesman. And he's an action fighter, which is what keeps him marketable. That he does make for fun fights.
He does.
Big Baby versus F.A. Ajagba, Arslanbek Mahmudov.
Martin Bacoli.
I think Jarrell Miller gave a great account of himself yesterday. He should have won, but he didn't.
The prediction stuck and they scored it a draw.
But it's nice to see that Turkey acknowledges his efforts and will so reward him for the spectacle that he put on.
Good hustle.
Good shit, Big Gravy. Good shit.